It's very strange for me to think that you've seen this film for the first time in 2010. It was made. It was shown for the first time in 1980 at the San Sebastian Film Festival, which is one of the powerful festivals around the world. People really care about films in the festival, and the critics that go there believe they think what they know, what is good cinema and what is not. When it was shown, well, we had some sort of reactions, and not all of them were very good, I must say. It's not very well filmed or recorded or performed, as you have seen. But that's not the point, anyway. It was the first film of Pedro Almodóvar. I guess many of you have seen other films of Almodóvar, recent films, which are beautifully filmed, recorded, and performed, because the genius was there, but he didn't have the money nor the skills to do things. I was going to say right now, to do the things in a proper manner. But you never have to do things in a proper manner unless you want to do things in a proper manner. But he wanted to do things. We wanted to do things. And I think that was more important at the time than having the skills or being a perfect musician. We were not great musicians at the time. We were learning, but we were doing things. And that was changing the tide of things as were happening in Spain at the moment. I was 15 when I started the film. I was 17 when I ended it, because we didn't have the money. So Pedro used to call a Saturday and said, "Can you come up tomorrow? I've got money enough to make one of the scenes." And we said yes, and we were there. Maybe you have noticed, most of the time I have long hair, short hair. I'm fatter, slimmer, because it's almost 3 years, the time that took us to make the film. We never knew it was I never knew I was going to be talking about this film 30 years after, of course. Maybe I would have thought about it a little bit more, but you never think of those things when you're 15, which is very good. Pedro has ended up being one big piece of what Spain has become. Of course, he's not the only one, but he shows very well in his films, and I must say, even in the way he speaks and the interviews he gives to the magazines and to the television shows, it's a way of not being afraid of speaking out. Not always being polite, probably, but not wanting to be rude. This film didn't want it to be rude. I guess it's quite rude sometimes. But it's very naive. Jon, the ambassador, used the word naive, and it's basically naive. Okay, we're talking about drugs, we're talking about sex, we're talking about a 15-year-old girl who's in love with a 40-year-old woman who is beaten up by her. But it's very naive. It's naive because we didn't make it with a cross mind. It was like, this is how things are going to be told. And it was not a game, but it was not also something we thought was going to give us an Oscar. So we all were very clean when we were performing, when Pedro was writing. I think all of the things that are in Almodóvar's films to date are in this film. The way he speaks about women, about relationships between people, the way transgender people are portrayed without even noticing that they are transgenders. They are treated as a man is treated, as a woman is treated, as the porter is treated. Everyone is treated the same. They are very democratic in a way. It's his way of making us perform those characters also. But this is impossible to understand if we don't talk about Spain in 1980. Jon has already said some things about this. Of course, for me, for example, I was I was 15 when I started the film, I didn't live too much that military repression because I was at school. I mean, you don't really realize those things. But for Pedro, who was like more than 10 years older, the issues were different. And there was a generation of, let's say, people that were trying to change things, but they were in other areas. They were more into more dogmatic, left probably, and they were questioning political, and they were really changing things. We were changing things in other way. We didn't realize we were changing anything. We wanted to change our lives, first of all. We didn't want to lead the lives we saw, the roles we saw in our families, in society, on television. So we decided to make roles ourselves. No matter you were a man or woman, transgendered, young, old, fat, nice. It was all very on the same level. And we never thought that was going to go over and go to other people. And suddenly our family, which was like 15, 20 people, they all appear in the film. Filmmakers, painters, photographers. All the shootings of the film were made in real houses. I mean, when you see those beautiful paintings in a house, that was the house of these painters whose name were Costus. When you see somebody opening the door to the postman, that's Fabio McNamara, who's a great artist, who's right now showing his art in Spain. It's all real. Basically because Pedro didn't have money to hire actors or actresses, so he just called us and said, can you come along and do a part of the film? But it's got, it's charming and it's very naive. Going back to the Spain we left in 1980, it was difficult because we had two different people sort of working against us. One side was very clear, militaria, church probably, people that had the power before and thought we were very transgressive for their thoughts. But it was very, very, very surprising to find out that probably what we could call our elder brothers, who were left-wing, who were supposedly open-minded, who were supposedly wanting to change the country, they also didn't like us very much because we were not committed absolutely against capitalism, and we thought maybe Warhol was more interesting than, I don't know, than Rimbaud, I don't know, or Jim Morrison, I don't know. So we were in the middle of nowhere. We were really the new thing without knowing it, because this is not a generation. I was 15, Pedro was 30, Fabio was 27. It's not a biological generation. It's a generation of people that didn't fit in with anything at the time, even if you were 14 or 55. And we sort of got together. Some started making films. I started making music and making magazines. Some others started writing songs, making fashion. And that's how this thing that now we call, or they call movida, which means movement, started on. But really it was 15 people at the time, not more. And we always talk about Madrid because it's really some sort of thing that happened in Madrid, but it was happening in all over Spain. Of course, it's always, as you know, it's always easier that things happen in a big city. Different things happen in a big city than in small towns. And so Madrid, for the first time, led this, because Barcelona had a very strong cultural movement in the 60s, in the 70s. It was moving all the time, but suddenly Madrid was moving for the first time. And I think what has done, it was seen at the time as something that came from, the capital. And that's not the point. The point is that when things started moving around the end of the 70s, they haven't stopped. And in these 30 years, things have changed a lot, as you know. We have elections, we have governments, We decide who we want to have as rulers. We also decide sometimes that we don't like the rulers we have, and we can say it, and it's very important. But it's not only political. In Spain, like in India, has its own cultural focuses, and the wise thing is always to mix them up, not to get lost with whatever comes from the United States or from England, or so I think in a wise way, what we did in Spain and what you do in India are very similar. You get things of around the world, of course you do, but you have a very strong personality in everything you make. You've made the biggest film industry right now, and you've exported some sorts of rhythms like Bhangra, and everybody around London is dancing Bhangra, even if they don't know what it is, but you sort of mix things, and that's what we did at the time. Jan mentioned all sorts of bands and artists at the time, and I think for us, for example, at the end of the 70s, we were really, our influence was punk, because punk, not as the music, because punk was not a music at the moment. This has become, Green Day did not exist in the 70s. That's something that has happened 30 years after. At the moment, the punk thing was, I'm not going to follow a line, I'm going to have my own personality. I like glam rock because I like Bowie, or I like Warhol because I like the way he treats art and the way he mingles with capitalism. But I also like Sara Montiel, which is one of our greatest artists in films. Or I like Lola Flores, which is one of our great folk singers and dancers. And you mix everything and you really have something new. And that's what happened at the beginning of the 80s with Spain, which I find is something very similar that is happening here now. Jan was mentioning that I've always been very involved with lesbian, gay, bisexual rights. It's not only being involved with the rights. As you have seen in the film, it's my life. I mean, I was generously raised by people who doesn't feel and think in the same way that you see in the soap operas. So this is my family. This is the way I was raised. So this is the way I think people should live if they want to. So of course, when at this time, 1980, nobody was talking about gay rights. I mean, let's be serious. Even feminists were quite shocked with this film and the relationship between my character and the older woman. And we had some very strong and annoyed feminists carrying us around with their critics. And nobody was talking about gay rights. We were just living. We were going out, we were doing things, and suddenly, some 10, 15 years later, in a place called Chueca in Madrid, which is a part of the town. It's just like, I don't know, if you say London, Soho, or whatever, if you say New Delhi or Old Delhi or whatever. It was it's in the center of Madrid, and it was a place that was, at the time, in the 80s, heroin struck very strongly the Spanish society. It was really a great problem at the time. Many people died. Then it joined with AIDS, so it was a big massacre, what we had around. But also, as you know, dealing with heroin was done in the streets, and was done in the streets of Chueca. So it was a neighborhood where people lived, because they were always lived there, let's say old people lived there, and they found themselves living in a dangerous place where they couldn't go out. And we're talking about the center of Madrid. I mean, it's by Gran Via, which is the main street of Madrid. A gay library opened, I think it was at the beginning of the 90s or at the end of the 80s, I can't recall. It's called Bercana. And suddenly, there always were like 2 or 3 gay bars around this area. But as you know, things that happen at night, we only see them if we go out at night. so they don't really get to the newspapers, they don't really get to the neighborhood. So when this library opened in the daytime, and gay people went there to buy their books, have a cup of coffee, we started to have a gay day life, because we do exist in the daytime, even if you don't believe it. And after that, another guy opened a cafe, and another guy opened a flower shop. And suddenly all those dealers that were selling drugs, they moved away, because they didn't want to have such people walking around. So suddenly the neighborhood was cleaned up. People was back again, living their lives, going to the market. And these old ladies that lived in the neighborhood were delighted to have all these gay people around, opening bars, opening cafes, opening restaurants, and giving life to the neighborhood. I've been in many cities in the world, of course, I travel a lot, but I've never seen something like Chueca, not even in London or New York. Christopher Street in New York, it's a street where you have gay bars, but you don't have that sense of neighborhood. And in Madrid, we have a neighborhood. When we started going to the gay pride, back in the 90s, I think we were like 100 or 200 people, and now it's about 2 million people every year. This is one of the things that make me also aware of what's going on. When there were like 100 people going there, everything started, we walked around the street, and when everything ended, they started singing a song. One of my songs, 10 years older at the time, which is called ¿A quién le importa? Who cares? The song was not new at the time, but people started singing it because the lyrics really worked very well for the feeling we had at the moment. Who cares about who I sleep with, who I like, where I go, what I wear? I really don't care what you do, so you shouldn't care about what I do. So they started singing this song every year, and when it was 200 people, it was 200 people. When it was 1,000, it was 1,000, and now we have 2 million people singing a song that that was not pretended to become what it is now, but I'm very proud of it. It's sort of something that unites people and makes them say together that, well, they're not going to stand for something they don't like. As you know, we have gay marriage in Spain now, and well, I have just been in Mexico City, and now people can get married in Mexico City, just in Mexico City. It's something that still has to be worked out in the country. And I'm going to Washington next month, because also we are celebrating the first marriages there. Of course, I'm talking to this country, to this society, who has its own life, its own evolution, its own history. It's not polite to come from the outside and talk to people and tell them what is better and what is not. But I really believe, and I really sense for the people I've met here, that things are changing, and are changing on the side I like. I'm sorry, I can't be partial about, I have to be partial about this. There is a side I like, and there is a side I don't like. And things are going easily to the other side. Right now, Pedro's films are very well known. He's, as we should say, our ambassador all over the world. But it was very nice. You could see tonight how he started without, well, he had all the motivations, but he didn't have ambition. Somebody that has ambition doesn't make this film. I truly have to say. He would have waited some years to be capable of filming in a better, I don't know, with better lights or things like that. So I think it's very useful. That's the only thing I can say. If you have something to do, do it. Don't wait. Don't wait until you think you are skilled or until you think you know the process. That's an artisan. It's very good to have great artisans around, but it's something very different to be an artist. So I think I'm talking to a very grateful audience, because you have been watching the film that it's not easy to watch 30 years after, and I'm very glad to be here with you tonight. ¿A quién le importa?